Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Debbie Steinberg-Kuntz. I'm with ParentWiser. We are the parent ed organization for Issaquah School District for about 40,000 parents. And we are so thrilled to have Tina Payne Bryson with us today. Hi, Tina.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I was just telling you in our little pre-chat here that I'm also a family therapist and parent educator. I did a lot of research over the last few years for my own parenting courses, and your books, No Drama Discipline and Whole Brain Child, just stand out among all the parenting literature as science-based and so solid, and just as a mom, so helpful to understand what's going on in their brains. Because what's so interesting to me is of all the things we learn in school, we never have a class on relationships or emotional intelligence. And parents want to know how to solve these problems. And there's all this information that we need to get out to them so badly.
Yeah, well, Dan and I are both so proud about the books and the difference they've been able to make for educators and parents and clinicians too. And so I just get so excited for every opportunity to get to talk about the content, because it really can be transformative as we start to practice this way of thinking and being with our children.
Absolutely. And I know you have a new book coming out, The Yes Brain, and the little bit of research I've done on it so far, it seems like you're really able to boil down the different brain states that kids and parents have, so we can sort of understand what's going on under the hood. Can you talk a bit about what is the Yes Brain?
Yes, well, I'm so excited. The book comes out January 9th, and so we're really excited about it. And we just got overnighted a copy of the book, so this is what it looks like, and we're just so excited about it. It's always fun. It's sort of like gestation. It takes a long time to kind of grow a book, and then it's like the birthday will be January 9th, but I'm getting like a little ultrasound almost by getting to look at it.
That's great.
Yeah, and one of the things that's so cool is that, the Whole Brain Child really is about how to tell parents about ways that just practically in the moment we can really help wire our children's brains to be more integrated so that they can be more flexible and adaptive, coherent, meaning what they do makes sense, energized and stable. Which are really a great definition for mental health and a great definition for a healthy relationship and social and emotional intelligence. So we talk about 12 strategies to help integrate our child's brain. And the first strategy in that book is called Connect and Redirect. So we can talk about that. But then the second book, No Drama Discipline, is actually really Dan's and my sort of attempt to create a cultural shift in how we think about children's behavior and how we respond to it, primarily based on connection strategies and redirection strategies. So there's sort of a thread. And then starting in the No Drama Discipline book and then really carrying forth into the Yes Brain is, how do we take everyday moments with our children, and especially the times when they're in distress, and use them as opportunities to make them resilient and to understand themselves better and to understand other people's minds. Because the brain, so here's the fundamental kind of key nugget of the Yes Brain. The brain is either in a reactive state, which we call a no brain. And in this reactive state, we are shut down, we're afraid to make mistakes, we kind of live in anxiety, we kind of get really aggressive or shut down, or kind of in a reactive defensive state. Or the brain is in a receptive state, which we call a yes brain. And in this receptive state, we're willing to try things that are uncomfortable. We're willing to kind of push ourselves to our outer limits, to be resilient in the face of adversity, to be open and curious and creative, and to think about success kind of in a new way, as opposed to kind of the rigid achievement-based no-brain approach to the world. So
I'm just curious about that, if you don't mind. So is it sort of like a black and white, there's yes brain and no brain, or is it sort of like there's a gray scale, and you get up to a certain point, flip your lid, go into no brain, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so obviously, we don't just typically flip a switch and it's one or the other, although some kids are very quick to shifting those states, and Often when they're kind of a 0 to 60 kid, there are some things we want to be curious about why their nervous system is so reactive so quickly. But one of the ways we talk about this is by talking about the nervous system. So I know you know this, but for our audience, we'll talk about how we all have two branches to our nervous system. One is called the sympathetic branch, and that's like the gas pedal that revs us up. And, when we get really excited or we're feeling afraid or angry, it's like the dial on our nervous system gets turned up. And then we have this other branch, the parasympathetic branch, which is like the brakes that kind of calm us down. And we need a lot of parasympathetic activity kind of fall asleep at night. And when these two branches are well balanced, we call that in the new book, in the Yes Brain, the green zone. And when we're in the green zone, this is a yes brain state. Even when something is really challenging or we're frustrated or angry or whatever it is, we are still able to make good decisions and understand and kind of have some self-awareness, like I can tell I'm getting really mad right now, and we can really think and make choices. And that would be, when our brain is in its most integrated state. And so what we see is that we are, and I'll go back to the same list of words, which is the acronym for FACES, which is where we are flexible, adaptive, coherent, energized, and stable, even when things are really challenging, even when we're uncomfortable, etc. So that's
a serious life skill.
Oh, it's a serious life skill that is really hard for adults sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
So that green zone is really important. We're going to talk, I hope we get to talk about that quite a bit. Now, if our nervous system gets too elevated, so if we go into hyper states of arousal, our nervous system gets too revved up, we go into, in what with the book we call the red zone. And so the red zone is like a volcanic state in a way. So in the red zone, we actually have physiological changes. And some of this is based on a bunch of different people's work, including Stephen Porges and Pat Ogden and a bunch of others. But when we go into this red zone state, the physiological changes that happen are our muscles tense up, our eyes get big, we can have temperature changes, so we can get hot, we can have skin changes, we can get red, or you've probably known people that when they get nervous, they get really splotchy.
Yeah.
And your heart rate increases and your breathing increases. And so this is where fight, flight, freeze start to come on. Now, the opposite of that is what we call the blue zone. So the blue zone's kind of at the bottom, where basically the nervous system gets turned down so far that we go into kind of shut down, collapsed states. So physiologically, the muscle tone gets really floppy, shut down. If it goes intensely enough, we can even faint. We can even go into faint states. So this blue zone state, the heart rate slows down and we just get really shut down. So both the red zone state, which is more sort of like acting out, and the blue zone state, which is kind of like more internalizing, shut down, these are both no brain reactive states. So what can happen is some days our green zones are big and fat and hearty and we can tolerate a lot. My co-author Dan Siegel has this beautiful phrase called the window of tolerance. Our window of tolerance is juicy and we can withstand quite a bit. And then some days our green zone's really tiny, and it doesn't, if you're a 3-year-old, you're going to have a tiny little green zone. Developmentally, that's appropriate. So, if your parent cuts your muffin in half and you say, put it back together, and your parent says, I can't put it back together, you may go into the red zone, and that's what we would expect developmentally at times for younger kids. So what happens is, we can kind of go higher and higher and higher, and then maybe we have a parent who helps us regulate and we don't go into the red zone. Or we're old enough, maybe even 4 and 5, that we've learned that I can go to my calming center to kind of make my nervous system calmer. Or a lot of kids intuitively will know how to regulate themselves most of the time. Like they might need jumping and running and some movement to help keep them in the green zone. So we can kind of, it's often not just a really quick jump. It's like it starts to go up and up and up, or we start to go down and down and down till this shutdown space. So go ahead. I have a really practical tip there.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, really one of the ways we want to think about this then as our role as parents, and this fits very much into the discipline stuff, which we can get into, is that I really think about my job as a parent being that when my kid is outside the green zone, which often looks like really terrible behavior, my job is to get them back into the green zone. And we can talk about strategies to do that. And to expand their green zone over time so that they are more resilient, have more regulation, more often flexible and adaptive, and all of those things. And that my job in some ways is to kind of, when you go bowling and the bumpers come up so that you don't have all the gutter balls. My job is to kind of be the bumpers to my kids' green zone, so that if they start to get really rigid and collapse, or if they start to move into explosive states, my job is to help kind of co-regulate with them to keep them from going into these states of distress.
I love that. I absolutely love that, because I think there's two parts of it, which is what do you do in the moment? And then I imagine there's sort of like a sleep, diet, exercise, not being overscheduled lifestyle component also.
Yeah.
And then not only managing our kids' states, but managing our own states as well.
For sure. I mean, we have to, as much as, probably even just as important, if not more than monitoring our child's green zone, is monitoring our own, right? And that's the key, is to keep ourselves in the green zone, you know, and regulated and calm and resilient in the moment. You know, when you talk about trying to survive the moment, it makes me think about the opening story in the Yes Brain. And we talk about this story that I heard as a graduate student, and it's about these children who are who are in this river, and they're really struggling, and they're trying to kind of just make it. And so all of these adults rush over to help save these kids. And so these kids have come downriver, and they're struggling. So downriver, there's all these adults just pulling them out as fast as they can, helping them survive. And at one point, one of the adults gets up and starts to walk away, and the rest of the adults say, "Where are you going? We need you here. These kids are struggling." And the person says, "I'm going upstream to find out where they're falling in." And I think that's such a great story, because as parents, our daily, we have downstream moments where our kids are really, they're totally falling apart, or we're falling apart. Or maybe it's more chronic, even, where we're really concerned about our child. Maybe they're having significant chronic behavioral issues at school, or we're worried that there's a learning challenge, or will they ever be mature? Will they ever care about other people? These fears that we have. But we also have a lot of moments in the day where we're trying to do more of the upriver stuff, where we're trying to build skills and prevent things from kind of going badly. And what's so great about the Yes Brain approach and the approaches in our other books is that the way we respond in the moment can do both at the same time. Both kind of the downriver, get them back into the green zone, and the upriver, expand the green zone. And the key almost always is, and we can talk about all kinds of strategies, like helping them move their bodies can shift the neural networks. We can talk about all that, but the go-to, the thing that is the most powerful thing we can do that both gets kids into the green zone when they're falling apart because their muffin's been cut in half or whatever else comes up, or they're melting down about homework or whatever it is, and that also expands their green zone over time and promotes integration in the brain, is connection, relationship. I was sitting with a group of colleagues at a conference, and they said, "Okay, Tina, take everything you know. What's the one thing you would tell parents?" And I paused and I thought, and I said, and this is very much my personality, I said, I have to have two things. The first thing is that when our children are in states of distress, even if it looks like bad behavior, that they are having a stress response, and that what we should do first and foremost always is comfort, comfort, comfort. So that key is just empathy, connection, and just basically soothing the heck out of them when they are in distress.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I said is that we have to have the self-care and support in order to parent that way, to have the capacity to do that, because it is a lot easier, though actually less effective, to just yell at our kids or send them to their rooms or throw out just random consequences. But the truth is that when our children are acting out and when they're having misbehavior, or they're just falling apart emotionally, that's when they need that's when they need us the most. And if we can just validate and give empathy, I was doing an event last night at locally, and it was an expert panel, and I was talking about this idea that when our kids are falling apart, that's when they need us the most, that empathy and connection is what we should always our go-to. You don't even have to figure out like what's the best problem solving, just go comfort. And so I had this dad raise his hand, and I knew what his question was going to be because I get it every single time. Yeah, but aren't you just giving, attention to the misbehavior? Like, can't you comfort them too much? Isn't that going to make them too dependent on you? And the research is really clear that we don't have to worry about any of those things. That we know from the research that when children are falling apart and we respond with comfort and connection, it actually wires their brain to move from falling apart, disintegration, dysregulation, back into regulation, and back. So basically back into the green zone. And when we help them do that, it actually wires their brain for them to be able to do it for themselves. So it makes them more independent. It makes them more resilient. It makes them tougher in the face of adversity. So we absolutely cannot spoil our children in this way. Just one caveat though, if kids, and that's really the idea of connect and redirect, is we're connecting with them emotionally and saying, this is really hard. You're really upset. This is not permissive parenting. This is not about just letting them get away with things. And, and if your kid is destroying property or hurting themselves or hurting others, I don't want you to say, oh, you're having a really hard time. Like, you may need to stop the behavior and then move to connection.
Right.
We absolutely can enforce boundaries and should enforce boundaries and have high expectations while we are comforting and soothing. And those can go together.
So let's get really practical. We did a surveyed a bunch of our parents, and what came back as one of the top challenges is a parent yelling and getting intense. And I think so often what happens is, child's getting into red brain and parent just automatically gets into red brain
it's
too.
Contagious.
So I think when child's getting into red brain, for me to be in the moment thinking, now I need to go into green brain, like how do we actually do that in the moment?
Oh, it's so hard. It is so hard. And I don't do it perfectly. In No Drama Discipline, Dan and I both in the appendix tell a story about a time we completely, were red brain parents. And I even threatened to remove one of my children's body parts. So, when we have ruptures with our kids, this is wonderful to repair with them. And that's
You're not alone.
Yeah, you're not alone. We all do it, even those of us who study it and preach it and teach it. Okay, so I have a couple of really practical things. The first thing is I want to say we have to be patient and gentle with ourselves. And it takes practice and a lot of experience to be able to make this type of soothing, calm parenting our automatic.
Yeah.
But it does become automatic for us most of the time if we practice it. So that's the first thing, is be patient with ourselves and get the support we need and making sure we're getting enough sleep and all that. So we have the capacity to even do this type of parenting.
Yeah.
The second thing is to just understand and monitor your own, like if you're like, okay, I'm about to go into the red, and just having some awareness of the process and kind of what that feels like in your body, just that knowledge can be very helpful in helping you recognize it and stop yourself and say, okay, I'm going to pause. Now, I'm going to come back to my third suggestion in just a second, but I have to take a tiny little detour here and say that, the whole point of discipline is to raise children who are self-disciplined.
Yes.
And if you really take discipline down to its core, the original meaning of the word and what it really is that we're doing is teaching and skill building.
Yes.
And you have to be in the green zone in order to learn. And you have to be in the green zone in order to teach. So in discipline moments, we've actually been taught that we should address the behavior right then and there. Kids won't learn. That is wrong. It's based on old animal, primarily research. Even a 2-year-old, after a nap and a snack, we can say, let's tell the story about when you threw your shoe at mommy's face, and we can have a little reflective dialogue later. But, before you discipline, ask yourself, pause, is my child ready to learn? Am I ready to teach? Because in the name of discipline, what we might need to do first is to soothe our children to get them back into the green so that we can be then effective in teaching.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I can tell an example of a story in a little bit if we want to come back to that. But so how do we stay in that green zone so we can do that kind of work? Now, this is a super practical tip. And it's probably the thing that most people have come back to me and said, that was a game changer. It's like magic. Okay.
Nice.
I happened upon this accidentally in a clinical session with a family. So I was doing a parent consult. They had a little kindergartner who was very dysregulated consistently. He lived on the edge of the green zone, hovering in the red constantly, multiple times a day. And by the way, as a clinician, I don't actually think very much about diagnostic categories. I think about the green zone. So when a family comes to me and says, is my kid okay or not? That's the basic question. Is my kid developing neurotypically, or is there something going on? Green zone is what I think about. How frequently does your kid go outside of the green zone? And I look at that developmentally, what would be appropriate. How long do they stay out of the green zone? If it's more than 15 to 20 minutes and it goes on for 45 minutes to an hour, that is not a typical nervous system return to baseline. So that would raise questions for me. What does it take to get your kid outside the green zone? Is it just something little that sends them out quickly? And then how frequently is it happening? How intensely is it happening? What does it take to get them out? What does it take to get back in? And these are the questions I'm looking at that would lead me to say, okay, your child's nervous system is in a reactive no brain state a lot. Let's peel back the layers to find out what that's about. And it might be mental health related. It might be learning, processing related. It might be sensory related. It might be trauma related. It can also be parent related in that if you have a child who is starting to go red, and as a parent, we respond in moments that send kids further into the red zone, which is actually what most discipline strategies do. Most discipline strategies are counterproductive because we yell or we respond in ways that send kids further away from the green zone, making it less likely they can learn. Okay, so here I am with this family. They have a 5-year-old. He lives in the red zone. And I've detected that this is what they're telling me is outside of what's neurotypical. So we did some exploring, and this was a child who did have some sensory processing challenges, and that's what it was primarily about for him. Well, the parents had tried kind of everything. And so I'm sitting in a parent consultation with them, and the dad is saying something like, I'm so sick of this kid's tantrums all the time. Our family is held hostage to him. We have to walk on eggshells. He's ruining our family life. And, they
came and saw me last week. I had the same family last week.
Yes. So as we began to explore this together, the dad was like, his approach, he believed, and he and his wife were not on the same page. It's okay if you're not on the same page. They weren't in the same book. He believed that the child needed stricter discipline. And the problem was that they were trying stricter and stricter and stricter, and it was making things worse and worse and worse. So they came to me in a state of desperation. And as the dad started to talk to me, I said, well, what happens? Like, tell me about a moment when your child is falling apart and you're going into the red zone and he's going into the red zone. So the dad said, well, like last week, he was insisting on drinking from the blue cup. And I said, sorry, buddy, the blue cup's in the dishwasher. You can't have the blue cup. And he totally went red zone, like, I want the blue cup. And he's screaming and yelling. And eventually he starts kicking and hitting. So the dad says, this is how it always ends up. I end up screaming and yelling at him. I go into the red zone. I grab him and I say, go to your room, and he won't go to his room. So I end up standing there and I hold the door, and he's pounding on the door and kicking it, and I'm holding the door and I'm screaming at him. And it's just a red zone nightmare.
Yeah. Volcanic eruption.
Yeah. And nobody felt good about it. It wasn't working. It was just, they were feeling so frustrated and helpless. So I said to the dad, okay, so when you are yelling at him, when you're in the red zone, what does that look like in your body and face? And he was like, what do you mean? And so we talked about how when he goes into the red zone, his face and his body posture are really aggressive, and they communicate threat. His tone of voice, his facial expression, his posture communicate threat. And the human brain, when it detects threat, goes either red or blue. So Stephen Porges talks about this idea of neuroception, and neuroception is kind of our brain's perception of safety versus threat. And it's a very automatic process. And some kids have faulty neuroception, where even if something's safe, like being dropped off to go to school with a really sweet, safe teacher at a sweet, safe school, they go into the red zone or the blue zone because they have faulty neuroception. Their nervous system tells them threat, threat, threat. So that's why they go into those states. So this dad, I said, now you're showing all this aggression, so your child's brain has no other option than to go further into red or blue.
Right.
So I said, now if you saw a dog that was really aggressive, would you approach with that same kind of aggressiveness? And he said, no, that would be really stupid. And I said, okay, so what would you do? And he said, well, I'd lean over and I'd put out the back of my hand and I'd say, it's okay, come here. I said, right. So nonverbally, you'd be telling that dog, no threat, you're safe, you're safe. So I said, what can we do to communicate to your child's brain as quickly as possible, no threat? Let's try an experiment. And so I thought about my dog, who a fellow mammal, who had a trauma history. We adopted him from a shelter. And one of the things that Jasper would do whenever he felt threatened is he would immediately kind of get in like this really submissive posture.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to this dad, okay, I want you to try an experiment. And it's just an experiment. I said, I want you, the next time your child's going into this reactive red zone state, I want you to do two things. I want you to sit in a relaxed posture. And this is the key. This is the magic bullet I was telling you about. It doesn't always work, but it's amazing.
Yeah.
Sit not at your child's eye level, but below eye level. So I said, I want you to sit in a really relaxed posture, crisscross applesauce, lean back on your arms, sit on the floor in a really relaxed posture.
Yeah.
Even if you feel like yelling, even if you feel like screaming, because counting to 10 doesn't work for most parents, those kinds of things. So I said, sit in this relaxed posture below eye level. And then the second thing I want you to do is to stop talking and yelling and only say, you're allowed to say two things. Number one, something empathetic about the feelings. So this is the connect part. And I would say something like, oh, buddy, you're having such a hard time right now, or you're so angry about the blue cup.
That's so confusing when you say that.
I know. And the second thing is to say in a soothing, empathetic voice, I'm right here with you.
Aww.
And one time I said to a group of therapists, I said, what would that have been like at your moments of biggest stress and distress if your parents had said, I can see you're really having a hard time. I'm right here with you. And a few of them got teary, and one woman raised her hand and said, well, none of us probably would have become therapists.
Right.
So anyway,
it's so comforting.
It's so comforting
to have that experience of comfort rather than, all right, now we're going to go out, and it changes the whole dynamic.
Yes. And what happens, and then I'll finish the story, is that if a kid knows that when they go into the red zone, which is going to look like disrespectful or aggressive behavior, that they're going to get in trouble, it actually amplifies their whole nervous system. It shrinks their green zone because they have the added stress of knowing something bad's coming. Whereas if you start to go to that place, there is comfort and connection and a bumper there that's going to keep you from going too far. Kids actually don't get so reactive. And over time, it totally dials down and their green zone gets fat. It's amazing if we can teach educators this too. So anyway, the dad says to me, you want me to sit in a submissive posture to my child? And I said, no. I want you to sit in a strategic posture to downregulate his nervous system.
Yeah.
So they left, and I didn't know if I would ever hear from them again. But a few weeks later, they came back, and the dad said, okay, I'm going to admit to you, when I left your office, I told my wife, that's so stupid. I'm not doing that. And I said, okay, well, but you're back. And he said, well, in a moment of desperation, my child was completely out of control. He said, I don't think I did it exactly the right way, but he said, I sat on the floor below his eyes, and I said, I can tell you're mad, but I'll just sit here with you. And I said, well, that's good. Movement in the right direction, right? We celebrate success. He said, but Tina, my kid calmed down faster than he has ever calmed down. He said, but something else happened. And here's to your original question. I stayed calm. And, this was such an experiment for me. I hadn't thought about that as an outcome, but it makes so much sense based on the science that we know, which is that the brain is an association machine. And so it makes these connections. So if you have an aggressive look on your face and an aggressive body posture and you're yelling, you're activating the neural networks that are associated with those postures and movements. So you're activating fight aggressive neural networks. So it amplifies those feelings. But if instead you sit in a relaxed posture, even if you're so pissed and you feel like yelling, if you sit in this relaxed posture and you say something empathetic to your child as best you can, I can see you're really mad right now. I'm right here with you. What happens is a totally different neural network gets activated. And based on some of the studies coming out of Stanford and Amy, what's her name's work? I'm blanking on it. She's the Stanford researcher who did the Amy Cuddy.
The postures.
Yes.
Yeah.
That within 3 minutes, the way we posture our bodies, like in a helpless position or in a power posture, within 3 minutes, there are hormonal changes. So in just 3 minutes of sitting in a more relaxed posture, we can change how we feel. We can model green zone, and our child knows that at their worst, we are there for them. And there is nothing better than that in order to, and this is based on decades of attachment science as well, to wire their brain to be resilient and hardy and tough, and to really have a yes brain approach to the world, even when things get hard.
And just for our audience, so Amy Cuddy has an awesome TED Talk about the body postures. And what I love about this intervention is anybody can do it. It's quick. It's simple. We just need to sort of preload our parent brain with this strategy that when things
Yeah.
get hot and heated, we just get on the lower level, say, hey, buddy, I see this really hard for you, and then bring everything down.
Yeah, and I think, let me give a really specific couple of examples about this. And I'll say one other thing, and that is that when you do that, when you have a moment like that where your child is falling apart and you are able to stay green and bring them back to green, and it feels amazing. And you get this little dopamine squirt, which makes your brain want to do it again. We had a parent, I have a place in Pasadena here called the Center for Connection, which is a multidisciplinary team to help kids and families. And we had a parent who kind of lived in the red zone herself, who had kids who had multiple challenges, and there was some family trauma going on. There was just a family the whole family was sort of living red.
Wow.
And so the mom was in a parenting class and group that was working through some of my books and strategies. And she called one of the therapists and she said, I just had to call you because my child had to have stitches over the weekend. And he was in the red zone. And she said, normally I would have gone red zone and stayed red zone. She said, but I just, the whole time I was like, stay green, stay green, stay green. And she said, I stayed green and I got my kid green and he stayed green even through stitches. And she just felt so much like, it was just this, I feel teary, like, as I say that, it was such a moment of triumph. And she, now she can keep doing it. So, okay. So why is this not permissive though? So let me tell you, how do we do that? How do we keep our kids in the green? And how do we stay in that place, even when our kids are violating boundaries and not cooperating? Okay.
Yes. Great.
So, I have 3 boys, 17, 14, and 11. And a few years ago, my 11-year-old was having a really rough evening and he was in the bathtub and he was refusing to get out. And, so he was saying really funny things like, this isn't even counting as a real bath. This isn't my bath. I haven't had my bath time yet. And he was just being really rigid, totally no brain, And by the way, no brain isn't just reactive, like tantrumy stuff. It's also like a kid who's perfectionistic and who's really rigid and has a hard time making mistakes or doesn't want to try anything new, or so we can talk about that too. So anyway, JP is my little guy. And so JP was like, I'm not getting out of the bath. And so, so here's the parenting moment. Here's the downriver survive moment. And the way, how I respond in the survive moment can either be a good upriver building or not.
Okay.
So I basically do kind of the first couple things most of us would think about is like giving the warning, in 3 minutes, we're going to get out, and, and maybe some fun silliness to try and kind of shift his state. So eventually I say to him, in 1 minute, it's going to be time to get out. So here I am, I have a boundary. I'm going to reinforce the boundary because kids feel safe when they know what to expect and that we follow through with what we say, not in a rigid way, but, to have those boundaries. And so I said, in 1 minute, it's going to be time to get out. And you can either get out by yourself or as gently as I can, I will help lift your body out of the tub. So in 1 minute comes, he refuses to get out. So I say, it's time to get out. Are you going to climb out yourself? No, I'm not getting out. So I say, okay, I'm going to pull your body out. I'm going to be very gentle with your body. And I'm telling myself that really more than anyone because I want to grab him, And so I pull his body out. And as I'm pulling him out, I said, you're so disappointed about getting out of the tub. You really didn't want to get out. And it's okay if you need to cry about it or yell about it for a minute. It's okay to let all those feelings out. And I'm right here with you as we get out of the tub. So I'm reinforcing the boundary, but he feels felt, and his internal experience is matched with what, like, I am seen by her. She gets it. So what happens is when our internal experience is matched by someone's response, like, I can see you feel that way, and this is how, this is what's going on. It actually creates an integrated, coherent core self. If you have a parent who dismisses, like, why are you so mad? It's not that big of a deal. You're lucky you even get a bath, or whatever. Some kids don't even have running water. Or, I told you, if we go into that state, what happens is, the internal experience is not matched externally. And then they either are like, well, I must be wrong, or I can't trust her. So it creates some disconnection in the core self. And so that's one way we can, really help maintain that.
Well, I think let's unpack that for a second, because I think that was some serious parenting jujitsu you did there. I always hold on to the old phrase, kind and firm. We want to go for kind and firm. So You were firm in the sense of, getting out of the bath is not negotiable, but
Yep.
kind in the way, and very in charge in a very, not dictatorial way, yet there was no wishy-washiness about it.
Yeah.
Yet you were really empathic and kind, and we are getting out of the bath, and
Yeah.
that
This
might
is
be
hard
hard.
for you. This is upsetting. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
just navigating that kind and firm is, whew.
That's great. And a phrase I use that's really similar is empathetic boundaries. So there's a
Yeah.
boundary there, but there's lots of empathy about what the child's experience of that boundary is. And
Yeah.
I had one story I like to tell is one time when JP was about 5 and he hit his older brother, who was about 8 at the time, and he hit him so hard that he left a handprint on his back, which apparently kids called 5-starring someone because it looks like a star.
Yeah.
So after I comforted Luke, who had been hurt, it was time for the discipline moment. It was time for me to address with JP, what was happening and hold him accountable for his behavior and all of those things. So, but I come out of the bathroom and JP's standing there and he's totally, and so in that moment, I immediately am like, he's in the red zone. So he's like, I mean, he's just furious, and his brother had done something to him that he didn't like. And so, parental responses in that moment can often be contagious, right? We go into the red too, but we might say, go tell your brother you're sorry, but they have no empathy. You don't have empathy unless you're in the green zone. Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
And we all know, we've all seen that with our kids. They do something that's not okay, but once they're regulated again, they come and spontaneously will apologize because they're back into it. So, or I might yell at him, why did you hit your brother? We don't do that around here. I can't believe you did that after everything I did for you all morning. Or I might spank. You want to know what it's like to be hurt? I'm going to show you. That's obviously we don't want to go there, but these are some typical parental responses.
Right.
Or to take away something, like I'm taking away your play date this afternoon because you can't be with people.
Yeah.
So what happens with all of those responses is it makes less likely that JP is going to learn. So I'm going to be a really ineffective disciplinarian if I do that, because I'm not doing anything to build skills or to teach so that he can do better the next time. So my first job is to get him back into the green zone. So that his brain goes into it from a no brain into a yes brain where he can learn. So the way I do that is through empathy. And I say, oh, you're so mad right now. What happened? Come here. And I comfort him as if I would have if he were physically hurt. He's He's emotionally hurt right now. So he tells me about this unfair thing his brother did. And I reflect back with that, validation. I can see why that made you so angry. I wouldn't have liked that either. That must have been so frustrating. So when I do that and I'm holding him and rubbing his little back, his whole body gets relaxed. And I now know he's in the green zone.
Yeah.
So then now is the discipline moment. So the way I love to do discipline is what's officially called reflective dialogues, which actually my kids, I think, might experience as a punishment because they don't really like doing it. But in that moment, I can say, you really hurt your brother. I know it's not okay to hurt other people. So what was happening for you? And he can talk about that. And then we can talk about what can you do differently next time? And at the end of that conversation, we can talk about how to make things right with his brother again. So at the end of that interaction, have I taught? Yes. Have I built skills? Yes. I don't need to do anything else. And in fact, I feel like if I give a consequence at that point, all his attention will be about how mean I am to do this to him and how unfair it is because his brother was wrong in the first place, instead of holding his attention on what he did wrong, how he can make it right, what he'll do differently next time, etc. So I think that lots of times the way we discipline is counterproductive. And the 4 kind of pillars of the yes brain are balance, which is really having a good green zone, staying in the green zone. Resilience, so being able to bounce back and get back into our green zone when we go out and stay in our green zone when things get hard. Insight, so with JP, what was happening for you? What did that feel like in your body? And then empathy, how can you make things right? What was that like for Luke when you hurt him? So, these 4 pillars of the yes brain, there are actually really practical ways that we can promote them. But even in our discipline moments, we can promote a yes brain by kind of keeping a yes brain ourselves and really working on those skills of insight and empathy and regulation. And it's our job as parents to help co-regulate to help them stay there instead of co-escalating and taking our kids into the red.
And whenever we're creating new habits, we always sort of mess it up at first. And so if you do all go into the red zone, do you sort of go into your repair then? What do you do when you sort of biff it with
Yeah,
all this?
maybe red zone where we yell back or, whatever. Like one of the funny things is like if a kid's like, I hate you, you're so stupid. And we'll be like, you can't talk to me like that, which is such a dumb thing to say because they just did. Much better to say, I can see you're so mad at me right now. I will listen. That's so much better.
Yeah.
And then once they're agreeing, then you say, the way you talk to me, that didn't feel good. And that's really, we want to be more respectful. What's a different way you could say that? So,
Yeah.
but another way we might biff it as parents is like one of the things I do is I kind of go blue on the outside, but I'm red on the inside. So like I'm really mad on the inside, but I shut down and I get withholding. So
I've been there. I've been there, yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to see you, So the most important thing is, and I have a couple of articles about how when we mess up as parents, it can actually be really valuable to our kids as long as we repair.
Yes.
So, if you think about your significant other, if you flew off the handle or you were really rude or you didn't handle yourself well, you probably wouldn't just like pretend like nothing happened. You would apologize, or you would say, hey, I don't know what was going on with me. Sorry about that. Or that really did make me mad, but I wish I had handled it better. We need to do the same thing with our children because we're teaching them how to be in relationship. And so as long as we repair with them and say, wow, I didn't handle that the way I would have liked. And if it's a big enough one that you still are thinking about, even if it was in the past, you can even go back and say, hey, do you remember that time? And most of the time kids will be like, yeah. If you're still holding on to it, your kid might be too, not necessarily, but maybe. Yeah. And you could even just really say, you know what, I thought about that the other day and I still feel badly about that. I wish I had done that differently. Are you still thinking about that too? And you can go back and make that repair, even to let go of it yourself.
Yeah, I love that. That's so nice. I've tried so many of these ideas over the years from reading your books, and I can attest they absolutely work. And I think when you do it consistently over time, you develop this relationship with your kids that is so lovely. And my youngest, who's 12, is now at the point where he can see when I'm in red brain. He's like, Mom, breathe. We're okay.
Yes.
And inside I'm thinking, this is awesome. I have done part of my job well. And you know that you are giving them skills for life that they're going to take into every relationship that they have. I mean, this is so valuable.
And it's not just building their characters or their skills, it's actually wiring their brain so it becomes automatic for them, and it's really, my children are by no stretch of the imagination perfect, but I teach this stuff at some different sleepaway camps in the around, and there's a camp in particular in Minnesota called Camp Chippewa for boys that my boys go to, and it's a lovely camp. And before the campers arrive every year, I go and train the staff. So I'm training, oftentimes these counselors that are in their young 20s, they can teach you all about the green zone, and they know about keeping themselves green and getting kids back into the green and all the strategies to do that. But it's really funny because sometimes if there's a camper having a hard time, the counselors will call one of my kids over and they'll be like, hey, Luke, you got this one, or like one, like Luke, my 14-year-old is really a funny kid. And like, he'll get below the counselor's eye level and the counselor will get below his, and they'll play this game of who can get below each other's eye level the quickest, So they do become skills. And, just as another example of that, in the Whole Brain Child, one of the strategies we have is called Name It to Tame It. And it's about helping kids tell stories when something either has happened that's difficult, or even helping them prepare for something that's coming up that's difficult. And, even when my kids were babies and they would hit their head, or I have a video I show sometimes when I'm speaking about my 17-month-old Luke, and he had heard some fireworks and the sounds had scared him. And we did this storytelling about what happened and how Luke felt about it and all of this stuff. He was mostly using sign language when he did it because he was mostly pre-verbal. But it was amazing. And as he told the story, he could say, Daddy comforted me. And you could see him go, you can see his whole nervous system relax. But that helped survive. That helped, in the moment downriver. But it also became a strategy that my kids could use. So like when JP was 5, he would come to me and say, hey, Mom, I saw part of a Scooby-Doo at my cousin's house and it's still scaring me. I think we need to name it to tame it. Or we need to tell the story. And he knew that if we talked about it and we told the story, it empowered him in a way to kind of let it go and move past it. So
Ah,
these strategies we're practicing as parents can become strategies our kids can use themselves.
I love it.
And we're raising our grandkids' parents. We're raising the next generation of parents.
Absolutely. Ah, you're just giving them a toolkit and they're like, oh, I can use this one. I can use this one. Wow. Well, Tina, this has been so fabulous. I know your book is coming out early January. People can pre-order it on Amazon
Yes,
now.
please pre-order it. That actually is really helpful to us. If you pre-order, we want to see those numbers going up. We're going to be doing several things with you guys in coming weeks and months. And we're just really, really excited about all that's coming. I've got tons of articles and websites on my website, tinabryson.com, and Dr. Dan Siegel, my co-author, drdansiegel.com. He's got tons of resources as well. And we want to partner with organizations like you and schools like yours and clinicians and colleagues like you to really create cultural shift and empower parents to do what feels right to them in terms of soothing and connecting with their kids, and not worry that's going to make their kids fragile or too dependent, because the research shows that's the opposite happens. So
Absolutely.
thank you for helping us create that cultural ripple wave of
Yeah.
connection, relationship-based parenting.
Oh, so happy to be a part of it. I mean, this is so beyond parenting techniques. This is we're creating that fabric of our brains, our kids' wiring. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so exciting. And
How to be in the world.
yeah, exactly. And maybe we can get you guys up to visit us in the district and do some hands-on stuff with parents and kids. We'd love to talk about that.
That's
And
great.
just feeling very grateful. So thank you
Thank
so much,
you.
Tina.
Thank you so much. I appreciate connecting with you, and I'm so happy to be connecting with you virtually, all of you out there.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Tina.
Thanks. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.